Thank you so much for having us here today. We're so happy to be able to talk to you all. I'm Oanh Meyer, and as Pastor Sarah mentioned, I'm a researcher at UC Davis at the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. And today I'm going to be talking with Bonnie Rhea, my colleague and friend from the Alzheimer's Association. So Bonnie's going to start us off and give us a little bit of information about Alzheimer's and dementia, what it is. And then I'm going to step in and talk about some of the science behind healthy brain activities, things that we can do to protect our memory as we age. And then we'll have some time at the end for questions, so stick around and we can have just an informal discussion together. So with that, I'll invite Bonnie to the stage.
We arranged for you to have background music while you're speaking today. So if anyone here in the sanctuary can't hear because of what's going on in the park, just give us a wave and we'll up the volume. Okay, so thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, everyone. As I've been kindly introduced, I'm Bonnie Rhea. A social worker is my training, and I'm a family care specialist at the Alzheimer's Association. And my role today is just to give you guys a very quick overview of what is Alzheimer's, what is dementia. So as I title my presentation, Basics of Alzheimer's and Dementia. I want to first start off with just sharing some facts and figures. The Alzheimer's Association annually, we produce what we call the Facts and Figures report, typically in the springtime around March. It's a great report if you want to know what's the impact of Alzheimer's to the US. So it gives you terminology, talks about prevalence and mortality rates. But here on this slide, what I share with you all are just some of the highlights from the 2022 Facts and Figures report. Of my interest, what kind of always grabs me is that there are currently more than 6 million Americans living with Alzheimer's disease. Of that 6 million, 200,000 are actually younger than the age of 65. Caring for those are 11 million Americans. These are our informal caregivers, our friends, our family, our church member that provides care. And as you can see on the bottom teal, the value of what they provide, these 11 million caregivers provide a value of $272 billion worth of care, unpaid. So just want to let you know that Alzheimer's dementia really impacts our community, and Wayne and I really appreciate you guys allowing us to be here today just to share a little bit about what it is and what could we possibly do for our own better health. So I'm going to play a video, and this is a video of our facts and figures to give you a little bit more for those who might be more of an audio learner. So let's kind of ground ourselves in the terminology. Oftentimes you'll hear myself, the media, doctors may be using dementia and Alzheimer's in the same sentence. And I want to just start off understanding what are the differences between the two terminology, because they do mean different things, similar but really key differences. So when the doctor approaches me and tells me, Bonnie, you have dementia, what the doctor is really saying to me is, Bonnie, you're experiencing a condition of cognitive decline. So there's changes in my memory, in my thinking skills, that is severe enough to impact my daily functioning. So the way I live my daily life is looking a little different because of this condition. That's a lot to say, right? So the doctor definitely is gonna probably say you have dementia. And that's all it really means. It's not telling me what type of it, what type or cause, what's causing these changes. And where we hear Alzheimer is the most common type of dementia. It accounts for 60 to 80% of the dementia cases in the US. And so this is why when you are reading an article or maybe watching the news and they talk about Alzheimer's dementia, they kind of use it interchangeably. Alzheimer is a slow progressive disease that typically impact the memory first, and then other thinking and other brain functions. Below on this particular slide, you see are some of the other more common dementia types or causes of a dementia condition. Vascular dementia is related to microscopic bleeding or blockage of blood flow to the brain. So depending on where the damage in the brain is maybe where we'll see the changes in their thinking, in their cognitive abilities. It progresses differently than Alzheimer in that it's a step-like in manner, meaning you do well, this is your baseline, and there's a blockage of blood flow to the brain. So you decline and you might get better. Think of this kind of stroke patients who might recover from their stroke, right? But they're not back at that original baseline. So they do pretty well, remain pretty stable before there's another kind of decline. So it's step-like in manner, which is different than Alzheimer, which is a gradual decline. And I mentioned these two first is because these are the two more common type of dementias that we deal with, what we see here in the US. Alzheimer being the most, vascular dementia being the second most common. Lewy body dementia relates to abnormal deposits of Lewy body proteins. And so it does create some memory changes, but what's really unique about this particular disease is that there are hallucinations earlier on than we see in other dementia situations. And the person living with Lewy body dementia also experiences sleep disturbances. So they act out their sleep dreams. So as a partner, as a spouse, that's something good to know, right? That my loved one with Lewy body may have some memory changes, but I should also be mindful that there are hallucinations earlier on and sleep changes. I don't want to really get hit if they're dreaming that they're running a marathon. Frontotemporal dementia is really a group of different dementias that impacts the changes in the frontal part of our brain and the temporal part of the brain. This is our personality impulse control centers. This part of our brain is our language center. So someone with frontotemporal dementia may not necessarily have memory as their first symptom, but maybe impulse control. They lost their social graces. You know, those are the ugliest shoes you're wearing, Bonnie, and you'll be like, Mom will never say that, but she's losing that social grace control right there. So those are just some of the more common dementia diagnoses you may see. There are other conditions such as Huntington, Parkinson, that's not listed here, that have a dementia component in their disease progress. Mixed dementia is a term that really refers that we're seeing what the doctor believes are two or more dementia happening. So Alzheimer's and vascular, or Lewy body and Alzheimer's. So any combination of more than one dementia happening is mixed dementia. So what are the warning signs? You know, as we get older, things do change. Cognitively, our brain does age. And here on this list, and back in the fellowship hall, there is a brochure called the 10 Warning Signs of Alzheimer that really gives you an idea of what could be problematic signs. So changes in memory that disrupt daily life, challenges in planning or solving problems, difficulty in completing familiar tasks, confusion with time or place, trouble with understanding spatial relationships or images, new problems with words in speaking or writing, misplacing things and losing the ability to find them, retrace your steps, decrease or poor judgment, withdrawal from social or work activities, changes in mood and personality. These are the 10 warning signs that we highlight to you all. What I want you to take away, these signs do not have to happen in the order that I presented to them. These signs are really different from normal aging. How many of us have the tip of the tongue moment? How many of us walk into a room and we can't remember why we did that? How many of us, if you work in my office, have a trail of Bonnie pens and Bonnie paperwork? So my point is, it's within the normal expectation of aging if it happens once in a while and it does not impact your daily functioning. I am not losing my words. I'm not having the tip of the tongue moment to the point where I am not communicating the way I used to communicate. So I encourage you all to know the 10 signs. Know that it can happen in any order than what is listed or how I presented. And what you're looking for that's problematic, if you see these signs, is the changes in the person's pattern of normal behavior and the impact it has on their daily functioning. If you do see that, I highly, highly encourage you all to bring in the doctor. These are 10 signs of cognitive changes. And as I mentioned, there might be other condition that looks a lot like dementia that can be treatable if we catch it earlier on. So that's the role of your doctor. You see these problematic changes, bring in the doctor, see if it's something like a vitamin deficiency. We treat that deficiency, potentially these problematic changes may go away. So I just encourage you to bring in the doctor if you see these signs. Lastly, I want to just give you some of the risk factors commonly asked of the Alzheimer's Association is, what is my risk for developing this disease? And so here I focus really on what are the lifestyle modification and what we know from research. Research shows that when we stay active and we exercise, it increases the blood flow and oxygen, keeping our brain in optimal function level. We know heart health is very important. So essentially, if nothing else from this presentation, I think Wayne and I want you to know is when you walk away, whatever is good for the heart is likely to be good for the brain. So managing your blood pressure, cholesterol, all of those in good healthy numbers, doing things like keep your heart healthy is really one of the basic things you can do to keep your brain healthy. Eating a good, well-balanced diet that will help us make sure that it protects our heart and also helps bring some benefits to our brain. Smoking has shown that the toxins from smoking actually decreases our cognitive functioning, or in other ways of saying that it increases cognitive decline as we get older. A good night's sleep, a lot of focus in the quality of sleep, not simply just getting those 8 or 9 recommended hours, but the quality of sleep. Again, that helps our body to repair itself. It helps our brain to also clear out amyloid plaques and tangles. And also lastly is to protect your head. I think more and more recently in the news, we've probably seen those in high impact sports, our boxers, our football players having head trauma, even our veterans coming back with head trauma. And so whatever we can do to protect our head is going to help us protect our brain. So I'm going to pause here. That was a really quick overview of Alzheimer's dementia, risk factors, 10 warning sign, what it is. And I'm going to actually turn it over to Dr. Meyer. She's going to talk more about these risk factors and what we can do and where we are at with research around this area.
Thank you, Bonnie. Let's give Bonnie a hand for that. So again, thank you so much for having me. Hopefully you can hear me okay in the back. I'm really happy to be here again. Thank you, Pastor Sarah, for letting me come. Alzheimer's is something that I feel very personally passionate about. My mother has Alzheimer's disease currently. She moved in with us about 6 years ago. She was diagnosed in 2015, moved in with us, and then recently it was time for us to put her in a home because it was just getting to be so much as her primary caregiver and having kids and working full time. So I definitely understand how challenging it can be, and it runs in my family. My grandmother died from it. My uncle died from it. My aunt has it. And so it's a cause that I feel passionate about, personally, but also professionally, and what we can do to protect our brain. Especially, and I feel very strongly, and I know Bonnie does too, in some of our AAPI communities, we don't really talk about Alzheimer's disease, and there's not a lot of awareness or talking about it in families. In my own family, there was a lot of shame and stigma tied to it, and so I want to do all I can to remediate that. So some of the statistics that Bonnie shared are sobering, but I want to give us hope, and we're in a spiritual environment, so it's accurate. And I want to give a disclaimer that anything that I say that's related to faith, I just can't help because I'm a Christian, but it's not views from the Alzheimer's Association or from UC Davis, but I might tie it into a biblical concept here and there. Because I think it's really relevant, right? Taking care of our bodies, taking care of our brains. So I want to provide us a little bit of hope that even though Alzheimer's is growing, it's affecting our populations, our older population. There are things that we can do to reduce our risk for cognitive impairment. So these are some of the major risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. The biggest risk factor is age. We know that as we get older, our risk increases, the risk for cognitive impairment for Alzheimer's disease. We know that individuals with a family history like mine have a greater risk. And it doesn't mean that if you have these risk factors that you're going to get Alzheimer's or dementia, but it increases your risk. Cognitive inactivity, lack of social engagement, depression, stress. So all of these risk factors, which you can read over, but I want to highlight the hopeful statistic. This was published very recently in the Lancet Journal that suggested that up to 40% of cases of dementia are preventable. And that's a big percentage. That's a huge percentage. And it's tied to things that on this list are modifiable, things that we can change. We can't change our genetics, can't change our family history, but we can work on our level of physical activity, how socially and cognitively engaged we are. We can work on our diet. And these are some of the things that I'm going to highlight today and share some of the science behind nutrition, physical exercise, and give you some examples, things that you can do in your own daily life to participate in brain healthy activities. And honestly, being here is one way to do that, right? You're learning new information, maybe some of the stuff that you have heard before, maybe some you haven't, but we'll give you some practicals that you can walk away with and do something about. So how many of you have heard about the Mediterranean diet? Anybody? Yeah, it was very popular back a few years ago, and it really still is. But there's a lot of science behind the Mediterranean diet. And here you can see on the food pyramid that at the foundation is really being socially engaged, engaged with other people, tying it into fellowship at churches. Those are great things, right? Other foundational elements of the Mediterranean diet are high intake of fruits and vegetables, fish and seafood, and less so at the top. You can see poultry, wine, meats and sweets, the very minimal amount. And I want to show some of the evidence. So how people heard about the Mediterranean diet was that it was this observation that countries in the Mediterranean, Italy, Greece, things like that, that these people had actually really low percentage when you compared them to Americans of heart disease and other things like that. And so they began to look at these cardiovascular outcomes, comparing people who adhered to a Mediterranean diet, who had regular intake of fruits and vegetables, whole grains and things like that. And they compared them to people who didn't, have that Mediterranean diet as part of their lifestyle. And they found that there was reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease when you looked at the people who actually had the Mediterranean diet as part of their regular consumption. And then when you think about research and science, really the gold standard of showing whether or not something is effective or randomized control trials or randomized clinical trials, or what I'll call RCTs, is when you randomly assign people, because one group could be someone who has a high Mediterranean diet intake, but they also are more likely to be social or exercise. And so they're already biased. But if you randomly assign people, like Bonnie, you're going to have this diet, Pastor Sarah's going to have this diet, and then you compare them later, you can say that this really was the effect of the diet itself and not anything about the person. And they found that in those RCTs also showed that people who adhere to the Mediterranean diet had slower cognitive decline over time. And you assess cognitive decline through different tests. You give them, different memory tests, or have them repeat numbers backwards, things like that, to be able to assess cognitive impairment. So that's some of the evidence from the Mediterranean diet. And I want to talk about the MIND diet, which is actually the diet that's a part of the US pointer study that I'll talk about here in a second. But it's really taking evidence from the Mediterranean diet as well as the DASH diet. Has anyone ever heard of the DASH diet? Yeah, Bonnie. Bonnie doesn't count. But it's a diet meant to lower, to address hypertension. And so the MIND diet takes evidence of Mediterranean and DASH diet together. And really, it's a very similar type of diet, but also features dietary components shown to be neuroprotective. That means it protects the neurons in your brain, protects your brain. And that includes a diet that's high in consumption of nuts, leafy greens, and berries. So things like blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, things like that. So how many of you have a diet high in berries? Okay, so we could increase it a little bit more. I actually am not a huge berry fan myself, but I have to like mix it in a smoothie or something to have it to be more delicious. But they found that people who adhere to the MIND diet, similarly as what we saw earlier in the Mediterranean diet, also had slower cognitive decline. So if you think about like a, sort of like a steep hill, the line is a lot slower. Instead of going straight down like this, those people who adhere to the MIND diet had a slower progression of cognitive impairment. And actually, they found that this difference in the rate of cognitive decline was equal to being 7.5 years younger for someone who adhered to the MIND diet as opposed to someone who did not. So that's a big deal. And again, higher adherence was associated with reduced risk of actually developing Alzheimer's. So I just want to give this last quick example about what a nutritious diet might look like with the MIND diet, because people are always thinking about examples, right? And here you can see, and I'm happy to share these slides if people want to email me or touch base later, but you can see that it's showing you graphically how much food. So at the very bottom is vegetables. So you want to have a meal that's almost 2 fistfuls of vegetables. That's a lot of vegetables, right? But that's sort of the recommendation for a meal plan around the MIND diet. Next is a level of protein. So this is like chicken or fish or other seafood. And that should look on your plate like the size of your palm. It's about how much protein you should have as part of a dinner, for example. And then you should also have carbohydrates in your meal. So things that are like whole grains, quinoa, for example, is a really good grain and it's also delicious. Beans, berries, and that's about the size of just 1 fist as opposed to 2 for the vegetables. And at the very top, you can see healthy fats. So these are the size of your thumb, how it should look on your plate. So these are things like nuts, or anything with extra virgin olive oil is the recommendation of the MIND diet. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of knowledge. You can also Google things like MIND diet examples to come up with meal plans and things like that. So next, I want to talk a little bit about physical exercise. And here's where I can't resist sharing a scripture. I think of that scripture for physical training is of some value, but godliness, training for godliness has much more value. Well, here I can say that physical exercise has a lot of value for brain health. In fact, when our clinicians, and I should preface by saying I'm not a clinician, I'm a social psychologist and I do research mostly. But when people come into our Alzheimer's disease clinic and they see our physicians, one of the first things that they want to ask is, what can I do to protect, to protect my brain, to prevent memory loss? And the biggest thing that our clinicians will say is to exercise, is to make sure you exercise, be physically active, be engaged, go outside. And there's some science behind it, which I'll share. And again, there are these observational studies, again, looking at comparing people who exercise versus people who don't. They find that people who do exercise have better cognitive functioning than people who don't. in randomized control trials. Again, this is the gold standard. You randomly assign people to exercise, say 5 times a week, and those who don't, and you compare those two. Again, the people who do exercise have improvements in their memory, in their thinking, and their brain structure. So even upon images of the brain appears to do better for people who exercise. And what's a typical protocol? People always ask that. What's the minimal amount I have to do to protect my brain? The typical protocol is about 40 to 50 minutes of brisk walking 4 to 5 times a week. And so it's a moderate level of intensity. You know, you can't just go for a leisurely stroll and expect that to be enough. You really have to get your heart rate up. So if I'm going on a walk with Bonnie and I can have a conversation without any problem, that means I'm not getting my heart rate up. I need to be, you know, out of breath, and Bonnie has to be like, what are you saying? I can't, you're breathing so hard. You know, that's when it indicates like you're actually exercising enough to impact your brain. And research has shown that everybody benefits, whether or not you are at risk, whether or not you already have some mild cognitive impairment. That's what MCI is. Even for individuals who have cognitive impairment, they're shown to have some improvements after physical exercise. So that's a great thing. So the recommended guideline is to participate in 150 minutes of moderate, vigorous exercise a week. And I just wanted to show you some examples here of what we mean by light, moderate, or vigorous physical activity. Light exercise is walking slowly, taking a stroll, or standing. A lot of people, you know, if we have to sit down at our computer a lot, we'll stand and work on the computer. That's light physical activity. Moderate is walking at a pace that gets your heart rate up, heavily cleaning, mowing the lawn. And vigorous exercise are things like hiking, jogging, carrying heavy loads. So with all of these, you want to think about what really tires you out and gets your heart rate up. That's really the moderate to vigorous level that you want to achieve for good brain health. And staying active is not only good for your body, but it's good for your brain. It also in terms of impacting things like depression level. How many of you, when you go for a walk outside, you feel better, your mood is better than when you are inside all day, right? It helps your body, it helps your brain, it improves your balance, it prevents and delays diseases like heart disease, diabetes, osteoporosis, and you don't have to buy special clothes or belong to a gym. So actually for me, this is, I'm really motivated to try to do everything I can to prevent Alzheimer's and dementia in my own life, because it has been so prevalent in my family. So that's my one reason for exercising, is because I don't want cognitive impairment. So I started exercising with a group of friends, just outdoors. It was during COVID, so we didn't go into the gym, but that was enough to get me going into a routine where then I was willing to do it by myself. And I just do it at home. I just turn on a YouTube video. There's so many great YouTube videos out there. And so I want to encourage you to think about how can you make this fit into your own life, into your own daily life. I think you were mentioned playing tennis like 5 times a week. Amazing. But maybe not all of us can do that. So what can you do? What is practical and feasible? Start small and then just increase it as you go. But you want to make sure you do something that you enjoy so you'll stick with it. And it's always good to have some accountability. Maybe do it with somebody else. So the last thing that I'll touch upon is exercising your brain. So there are things that you can do. There are things that are in the environment that affect your brain health, that affect your memory, attention, language, and thinking. And it's never too late to start. So we know that, for example, education and learning really helps to improve your level of cognitive reserve. So that's what you've built up already that can hopefully maintain your brain health as long as possible. And I'll give you some examples, but first I want to again, it always ties back to the research for me. There's a lot of research showing that people who have higher levels of education have a reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease later on in life. So the higher you go in school, the lower your risk for Alzheimer's. Where are all the kids? The kids aren't in here. They've left, but that's good for them, to think about. And I always try to encourage my son, the more college, and if you go to grad school, it's actually better for your brain. So that should be a motivator. There's also research showing that people who have engaged in jobs where there's a lot of complexity, so this is dealing with numbers, dealing with people, really trying to think through solving problems, that those people have a reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease later on. Research has also shown that working into older age, the longer you work, is associated with reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease. And lastly, individuals who more frequently engage in mentally stimulating leisure activities throughout their lifespan also have lower risk. And these are just some examples of things that you can do to keep your mind active. And so I'll just ask, we'll have a little bit of interaction. What are some suggestions or some examples, some things that you think that you can do that are cognitively stimulating? Does anyone have examples of things that they do? Yes.
Yeah, my parents do going back to college.
Going back to college, yes. Great suggestion, great recommendation. That's difficult educationally, but also socially, right? Like getting back into that environment. So yeah, that's great. Going back to college if you're older. What are some other things that people do? Yes.
Writing a letter to someone.
Writing a letter to someone, yes. You're engaging on a personal level and you're also writing. What are other things that you can do you think? Yes. Learning how to use a new instrument, that's really good. That's really good. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of cognitive energy to do that. So whatever takes a lot of cognitive energy, it's good for you. And if you can do it in a social environment, even better, because you're killing two birds with one stone. But I wanted to share some of these other examples of things that you can do. Learning to speak a new language. So this is a big one, especially for certain AAPI communities. I actually was born here in the US, but my mom was born in Vietnam. And she taught us at a very young age to read and write, but I've forgotten all of that. But when I started working, I worked a lot with the Vietnamese American community here in Sacramento and have a research study with older Vietnamese. I wanted to relearn how to speak the language. So I went to Casunas River College. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but they had a Vietnamese language class. So I took the class and it was great. It was great for my research and just my own, learning that language again. It's so good for your brain. So if you can do that occasionally, I'll try to read a couple of scriptures in Vietnamese just to help train that part of my brain. Reading a book, playing guitar, all these things, helping your children, your grandchildren with their homework, that can be really challenging because you've forgotten a lot of it. Like my son will ask me math problems and I'm like, I have no idea how to do this. I forgot all about absolute values. But things like that, playing music. So just think about things that you can do again that fit within your life to be able to participate in cognitively stimulating activities. So I want to close out by just telling you for the next few minutes about an opportunity to participate in research at UC Davis, what you can do for your own brain health to reduce your risk. And this is a new clinical trial at UC Davis. And a clinical trial is a research study that tests if a treatment is safe or effective. So if you think about a lot of the medications that you see at Rite Aid or Walgreens or any pharmacy, all of those have been tested via clinical trial. The COVID-19 vaccine, for example, tested via clinical trial. We have to make sure these are safe and effective before we, bring them to the general public. So that's what we're doing with the US Pointer study. But unlike those drug trials, it's completely about changing your lifestyle. There's no drug, there's no pharmaceutical intervention. It's all addressing some of the components that I talked about previously. Let's go on to the next slide. So the U.S. Pointer Brain Health Study is a brand new study. It's funded by the Alzheimer's Association, actually, and it's testing whether 2 healthy lifestyle programs that encourage exercise, healthy diet, and mental and social activities can protect brain health over time. And it's really the first study of its kind. It's in Sacramento here, we're enrolling 400 people. And across the nation, there's 5 total sites for US Pointer. We'll be enrolling 2,000 people over time. And so right now we're really close to our goal. Again, Sacramento, we have, I think, about 310 people roughly. So we just have about 90 more spots open for individuals to participate in this research. I'll talk about quickly what are the benefits of joining. And again, it's about intervening in your diet in terms of exercise and participating in social and cognitively stimulating activities. People who join the study are in the study for 2 years, so it's a long trial, but we really want to see if these things work, right? So we have to look at people over time and in a large sample. People, if they participate in the full 2-year study, get a complete comprehensive health review at the end of the study. We go over their cognitive exams, which they come in for every 6 months. We go over their health. So we look at their blood pressure, cholesterol, things like that. So they get regular healthy lifestyle coaching. So they have a lifestyle coach. They meet together in teams, so they get that social support. Regular health monitoring again, and they meet in their teams. So we try to find local teams. Right now, we're primarily focused on the Elk Grove and Carmichael areas in Sacramento. But if people are willing to drive to those team meetings, then we're enrolling people everywhere. There's no cost to join. Really, it's your time and motivation to want to do this, right? But we do compensate people for their time for participating in the study. So this is some of the eligibility criteria of who we're looking for. We're looking for people from 60 to 79 years old who are not regular exercisers. So, this is, we're not looking for people who are marathon runners or who already have a really great, healthy, lifestyle, because we want to see if we can detect change. And so we want to target people who might be at risk. So they might have risk factors like a family history. They might have high blood pressure or cholesterol. And we're really trying to intervene in those areas. So we want to find people who are at risk. So those are the eligibility criteria, but if you're not sure, you can always call and find out. People go through an extensive screening interview to see if you're eligible. So now we're currently recruiting, and it's really, my mission to try to bring this to the community, to as many people as possible, especially to communities like Asian American communities who don't really participate in research, to give people the opportunity to participate if they want. This is the website, and again, I can email these to folks, or you can sign up on the sign-in sheet in the fellowship hall if you want more information. You can email pointerstudy@ucdavis.edu, or you can call this number 916-734-0121. Again, we're sort of wrapping up. We have a few more months of enrollment. We'll be enrolling through February or March. And so please call if you're interested. And even if you're not interested in the study and you just want more information about what we're doing at UC Davis at the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, please feel free to reach out and contact us. So I just wanted to recap, and the Bonnie will close with a couple more slides. We know that the number of individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementias is growing. Currently, there's no cure There's no way to slow the cognitive decline, but there is hope, right? There's the ability to intervene in your own life by yourself, or to join the U.S. Pointer Study. Let people know about, the 10 warning signs that Bonnie talked about. Let people know about, being healthy, and spread the word about Pointer. And if you're a family caregiver, please get support. I know how hard it is, and Alzheimer's Association and other groups are there to help. And so I really want to encourage people to do that, to get help and know that you're not alone in this fight. And Bonnie can just close out the last slide.
And I echo what Dr. Meyer mentioned. If you are caring for someone, or if you're concerned or just want to learn more, the Alzheimer's Association is one of many organizations here in the Sacramento region that provide that kind of support. So speaking about the Alzheimer's Association, we do operate a 24/7 helpline. So if you're interested of, hey, I heard Bonnie talk about dementia and Alzheimer's, I wasn't quite sure, it was a quick 10-minute review. What's the difference? Give us a call. If you are actively caregiving for someone close by or long distance, and you're needing help with care planning guidance, our 24/7 helpline has master level clinicians that can work with you individually on what could be this next step for you and your family. We also offer free education. So in the fellowship hall, I did leave our virtual schedule of education programs so you can attend at the comfort of your home. Also, we do have 2 upcoming programs in person, one in Davis and one down in Elk Grove on 21st in Davis, 25th in Elk Grove. So the flyers are back there. But if you're interested in other opportunities, give our helpline a call. We can also get you connected to education. And lastly, all the resources that we know about is actually at your fingertips as well. So we partner with AARP to compile our community resource directory. This is a directory with facilities, if you're looking for residential care, home care agency, it's alz.org/CRF, Community Resource Finder. And so just know that if you're looking for resources, you don't want to give us a call, you can also do a search through this website as well. Lastly, it's a call to action. You heard from Wayne what individually you can do to protect your brain health. This is my call to action from the Alzheimer's Association. We work with families individually, but we really work with communities. So if there are folks interested in learning more, please feel free to coordinate. We offer our education free of charge. Attend one of our classes, or if you want one for your own group, make the request. We will coordinate with you to provide the education free of charge. A little bit longer than what I did. Those are all little snapshots. Share your story. We are always looking for folks willing to share their story. Bring the diverse voices of those impacted by dementia. It is, I think, a cause that Wayne and I share, that we want our community, especially our AIPI community, to be reflected in the research, but also to understand their caregiving experience. So I encourage you, if you feel comfortable sharing your story, we do Advocacy Day typically in the spring. It's a time to make sure that our representatives make this a priority, continue to make it a priority. So this is just a few different ways you can get involved as individual, as a community, and just the resources. With that, I wrap up and encourage any questions from the audience, those on Zoom. Please let us know if there's any question, and Wayne and I will be happy to take them. Wayne, do you want to stand up here? I see 2 hands right here.
This U.S. Pointer Study,
Mhm.
what is the primary endpoint after 2 years? What do you hope to see?
The primary endpoint is looking at their cognition. So we have tests of memory, language, thinking, and we're seeing if there's any change in those cognitive areas. Secondary endpoints are things like levels of hypertension and other health risk, but primarily we're looking at their memory and their thinking and seeing if that is better after 2 years.
So every individual gets a baseline when they start.
Yeah, that's a great question. Does every individual get a baseline when they start? Every individual will come into the UC Davis Med Center every 6 months. So we're tracking their progression over time at the end, as well as at the end of 2 years. But every 6 months, we're looking at their cognition. But great question. Thank you. Yes.
I had a question. These days, a number of supplements are being heavily marketed.
to help people with the memory like creditors. Can you comment on whether there's any kind of science behind those supplements and whether they actually work?
Yeah, I definitely can, and maybe Bonnie can too. I know Maria Carrillo at the Alzheimer's Association, who's the CEO of the Alzheimer's Association, did a really great presentation a while back that talked about how supplements have not really been shown to scientifically do anything in terms of Alzheimer's disease and dementia. I have heard of a lot of just personal anecdotal things about people who say, taking omega-3s, for example, is really good. But I personally don't know the research behind that, and I haven't seen anything regarding supplements. We actually, though, have a study going on at UC Davis looking at vitamin D to see if providing people with a sufficient amount of vitamin D has an impact on their cognition. So that's one thing we're looking at. Do you want to comment?
So what's interesting is the research I understand around supplements and dementia, memory, cognitive decline is really those studies typically look at folks who are deficient in vitamin D, vitamin B. And so it doesn't really, I think, come back to us as the general public. It doesn't really convey apples to apples. So kind of what I would say is Wayne is correct. The research around these supplements, the testing to see if they're safe and do they do what they promise isn't really there. They're not FDA approved, so they don't go through that rigorous standard. But I would just caution folks, if you choose to take a supplement primarily for brain health or for other reasons, is bring it back to your doctor, bring it back to your pharmacist, because there's a lot of also with the questions of what's the level of research, is also the quality of the product itself. And I have worked with families who've taken a supplement and finding out that, oh, it created complications to their health. That we thought we're taking it for this reason, but this person is, on a cancer treatment or has other medication, and it kind of took away the benefits of their other medication or the treatments. So with that, I would say just bring it back to the doctor, make sure that if you are taking supplements, you verify with those experts about, is this good quality, and understand, would it have other impact to any other medications that you may be taking. Any other questions? I saw one back there, and then we'll jump over here.
I have a couple of questions. The first is, I appreciate your effort for outreach and enlightening us all on this, but what about your primary care doctor? Are they going through any more recent or updated education than what they had initially in medical school? I mean, are they any more intelligent or well versed in this than the general public? I mean, or do we go to our primary care doctor and then they refer us to a specialist, a neurologist? What's the step-by-step process?
So just to summarize for those on Zoom, the question is, what kind of training do our primary care physicians are getting around brain health, dementia? And then possibly, I think the second question was, what's the typical diagnostic process? So it really depends. It is very common for many families to work through their primary care physician. That person, that PCP, plays a role in kind of evaluating, making sure that your health is where it should be. Because the process of diagnosing someone with a dementia condition is ruling everything out. So it's not because of your hypertension. It's not because of a vitamin deficiency, a metabolic disorder. That's where your PCP kind of helps you navigate that. So it makes sense to work with your PCP. You may also go to UC Davis if you prefer, one of those diagnostic centers in our area. UC Davis serve our Northern California region, and correct me if I mentioned anything wrong, Wayne. You can also go there and go work with them directly. My understanding of the process there is they're also going to work with your PCP team to pull what was your most recent medical history, what's the most recent medical test you may have done, to also start it. So really the diagnostic process, no matter you go with a specialist or a PCP, will involve a review of your medical health to see if there's anything that is accounting for the changes that we see. And they'll move, and based on what changes, what they notice, they'll move through the next steps. So maybe bringing other specialists, maybe doing brain scans and whatnot. So it's not a 5-minute conversation, as you can tell. That's a diagnostic process. To talk about what we're doing in terms of training our PCP, I will agree, many families I work with feel like their PCP don't understand dementia. And true, it is true, their training was very small in comparison to everything else. And so what I can say is the Alzheimer's Association, we recognize this gap. And so we do have a department that focuses on health system. How do we increase better outcomes along the dementia pathway? Those are some of our terminology. But what that really means for you all is knowing that we are working with PCP teams throughout the country to do training, specializing on how do they triage dementia memory concerns. What does that look like? So Project Echo is one of the ongoing projects we do where it pulls PCP teams across our region. And I can say that I am aware that 3 or 4 different PCP teams across our different system here in Sacramento actually participated in the most recent Project Echo, and they got one-on-one training. So they are learning from those who are experts in the diagnostics. So training among peers is happening for sure. And we are working with health system on a larger level to really improve those outcomes along, again, that dementia pathway. Wayne, anything to add?
No, I think that was really comprehensive. I would just say that you just have to advocate as well. That's what I had to do as a family caregiver, is to really advocate for my mom to get a good diagnosis. And so if your PCP is not able to do that, ask to be recommended to a neurologist, to a neuropsychologist, where they can do more extensive testing to determine what's going on.
I had a follow-up question or a follow-up comment, and that is, I don't mean to be a fearmonger, but one of the things that it seems is happening, at least in this country, if not the world, is dementia and Alzheimer's is becoming endemic, or maybe even a pandemic. It seems statistically all populations are being affected. So is it a result of toxicity of the air or toxicity of water? I mean, we read our water is all polluted with microplastics. So we all have to start drinking distilled water to eliminate this kind of level of exposure. I mean, we
Yeah.
can eat Mediterranean diet until we're all speaking Italian, but
Okay.
you know, getting plasticized brains,
Mhm.
what's the difference?
Yeah, so the comment about was the increasing numbers of Alzheimer's disease and dementia. And one is that people are living longer than they used to. And so again, age is the biggest risk factor. So if you're living into your 80s and 90s, your risk goes up much higher. I forget exactly what it is, Bonnie, but it's much higher the older that you live. It is true, they're starting to do a lot of research in terms of looking at air pollution and other exposures in the environment that might increase your risk for Alzheimer's disease. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say.
I think another factor is that we're more willing to talk about this disease. I mean, think about how our grandparents, older generations prior to that really talk. And I think the fact that we're a little bit more open to talking about this disease, the fact that we are living longer, these kind of add to the fact that we recognize Alzheimer is a disease. It's not normal aging. So there's that social bit of factor to why we
Yeah.
see the number increasing.
Yeah.
I think there was a question over there. Do you mind taking your mask off? I apologize.
I saw in one of your slides that was recommending 140 milliliters of red wine.
Oh. Well, remember that was at the very top of the pyramid, so the smallest recommendation possible. Part of the Mediterranean diet is to include red wine. That was something that's high in, in that diet. I think it could go either way. I mean, if you are already a current wine drinker, like a glass a day, I think that's fine. I don't think it's going to hurt you. If you're not, then I think that's fine too. You don't have to start drinking red wine, right? Like there are other things that you could do. There's a lot more on that pyramid. But yeah, good question. Oh, the mind diet. Yeah, but it was still very small. Yeah, probably just a graphic design issue. I don't want to encourage people to start drinking red wine if you don't. I think we have time for one more question. I want to be respectful of people's time. Oh, are there any Zoom questions? Okay.
Well, with that, we thank you for your time. Wayne shared her contact. If you're interested in US pointer study, please contact the UC Davis team. I would love to make sure that we are well represented and we learn what we can. If you have questions about the Alzheimer Association, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. It's kind of small, but our 24/7 helpline is 800-272-3900. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Wayne and Bonnie. We really, really appreciate not only you coming and being with us today, but your passion and your dedication to this. That, as Dave said, it's scary and it seems to be so widespread. And you gave us some hope to say there are some things we can do if we're willing to make some changes. And so I hope anybody who falls within that range of people who could be in the study, please jump in, because it's a really good idea, and we can participate and we can also help other people with that kind of support. And Donna has.
This is kind of a Parkview tradition. So Parkview Presbyterian Church, we're very proud of the teriyaki sauce that we make. And this is a recent brew. I'm hoping it has some of those good ingredients that are on the chart. But yes, thank you so much for coming today. And so we do want to present you with a bottle of our famous teriyaki sauce.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. God bless.